What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. If you're new to the channel, my name is Mike and I'm an avid coffee, record, music, food lover. So during my recent trip to Detroit, I tried to plan the trip around these elements, and so if you are into that stuff, hopefully you can take at least one thing away from this video. And if you do so, I would encourage you to like it for the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to see more videos such as my record haul behind me, I would encourage you to subscribe as well. So with that, let's get started. So I visited Detroit after my recent business trip to New Orleans. My brother lives there at the moment, and I plan to surprise my parents as well, who were driving from the Niagara region of Canada. I arrived on a Thursday night, and I like to do as many things as possible, and so I encourage my brother to check out this legendary jazz club, Cliff Bell's. If you love jazz and you are in Detroit, you cannot miss this spot. Cliff Bell's was this fourth grade educated man who worked really hard during the early days, especially during the Prohibition era of the 30s. His place was known for hosting kind of like a speakeasy kind of environment, and so at some point he got caught. He tried to evade the police. After multiple attempts to revive his location, it is now known today as this rather sophisticated spot for jazz lovers, and so nowadays it looks very pristine, very well kept. Staff is very friendly, and so together with my brother, we went the day before Valentine's Day actually. So pro tip, if you are planning to visit, I would encourage you to go during an off-peak time because it can get quite full. Luckily, we were able to secure a front row seat to the stage. And at the time, this Brazilian cover band called Canja de Boa was performing, led by this amazing female vocalist. The instrumentalists were also fantastic, and they were having tons of fun. I even came home with their promo poster. So overall, it was a great vibe. Drinks are pretty fairly priced. So if you want to check out who's performing at any given time, check out their website. Overall, I highly recommend visiting this spot if you are into jazz and are visiting Detroit. On day two, I had access to my brother's car, so while he was working, I had the opportunity to drive around. And as this is my second time visiting Detroit, I try not to visit the center of Detroit, but rather the outer edges of Detroit. So my morning naturally started with a cup of coffee. Now, if you want to separate from your typical corporate coffee chains and you want to support local, especially Black-owned businesses in Detroit, you really need to check out this coffee shop. Sepia Coffee is located a bit north from the center of Detroit. It's located in this rather rustic looking building, has a little bit of a charm to it. Their roasting facility is rather petite, and so it's kind of embedded in the coffee shop. It's a great place to co-work. There's a nice spacious table to work at. They served a pretty solid batch brew, which is what I had while I was getting some work done. So overall, their mission is to introduce specialty coffee to what has typically been a marginalized area of Detroit. And so given that it is Black owned, they really take pride in serving the community and providing access to people who typically maybe don't have access to specialty coffee. And I also find it quite affordable compared to specialty coffee places that I've been to. So if you want great coffee that's affordable and that's for the people, definitely check out Sepia Coffee. If you're looking for a cozy spot to grab a coffee in Detroit, you need to check out this spot. Milwaukee Cafe is this petite shop at the front, but at the back you have quite a lot of seating. It's connected to this building where at the time they were hosting this pop-up for Valentine's Day. I was greeted by a friendly barista. I asked him about some local coffee shop recommendations outside of Milwaukee Cafe, and he was very open to suggest some. I had a pretty good flat white as well. Latte art was on point, and when I had a seat, I really appreciated the rustic living room setting of the seating. There was a cute old couple that was in front of me, so it was kind of nice. I kind of felt like I was at a grandparent's basement or something. Coffee's great, and the staff is really friendly here. Now, after fueling myself with tons of caffeine, I I needed a break, and so I went ahead and went crate digging. I started my crate digging journey at the north of Detroit again, and I was on a mission to discover record shops that are typically not on the top of everyone's list. We have Third Man Records, which is really well known in Detroit, People's Records as well, located in the center, and then you have Dearborn Music in Dearborn. I would say this is a hidden gem. This record shop blew my mind, and I almost couldn't get in. So when I approached the door, it said that you had to knock really loudly because the guy is not always present at the front. So I had to knock quite a few times, and I almost left, but he eventually answered the door, and I was very thankful because I spent over an hour at this record shop. Whenever you're in Detroit, I highly recommend coming back with at least one soul record, as they are known for their Motown soul scene. You have Hitsville, USA, which is now a museum, but that's where they recorded the first records and albums from the likes of Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Diana Ross, for example. So I had a want list, but I was pretty open. I went immediately to the soul section and was really impressed with the selection they had. All kinds of price ranges. You can get budget records, you can get rarities. After almost an hour of looking at the main sections, I went over to the $2 bin and was pretty impressed. I got a couple of records from there that I will talk about in another video, which I found were steals. So yeah, that's gotta be one of the most impressive budget sections I've ever seen in a record store. They've got a couple turntables if you want to sample the music as well. So if you're looking for soul, jazz, rock, and even some gospel, I'm pretty sure you can find whatever you're looking for at this record shop. Considering that the owner isn't super involved, I found that quite nice because I could take my time, but any questions I had, he was able to answer them as well. So if you want to go a little bit off the beaten path, I would highly recommend Record Graveyard. So the next spot, in my opinion, is also quite underrated. This has got to be the most unassuming entrance, but don't be fooled because this record shop packs a lot of heat. Detroit Threads is essentially a vintage shop and record shop, and so if you're looking for used stuff, definitely check out this spot. They specialize in electronic, techno, a little bit of disco, but they've also got some soul, hip hop, and other main genres. But I was there for quite a while. I wasn't looking for anything specific because I'm not super into the techno scene. I did, however, end up spending some time at the disco scene and came home with a couple records, which I'll mention in the next video. But yeah, I found the records really affordable as well. Nothing super crazy. Pretty decent selection considering that they have all kinds of products like clothing, just random memorabilia. So you could really do some damage at this record shop. They've also got some turntables there for you to sample their music. But yeah, if you like vintage clothing, if you like electronic music, I would highly recommend to check out Detroit Threads. And while the first two I thought were hidden gems, I think this one is even more of a hidden gem. This has got to be the most underrated record shop in my opinion, but I actually didn't come home with anything. And the reason for that was because by that point I'd already come home with tons of records and I was a bit concerned for my luggage space. But this time I went with my brother. He drove me, and it's in this random area in Detroit in my opinion, but it's packed with so much good stuff. Right away, I felt quite welcome. The staff greeted us. I felt like I was at this African-American grandparents' home that just collected stuff over the years. And so not only do they have records, they have CDs, they have memorabilia, they have audio equipment as well. It's not the most organized place in my opinion, but it is spacious, so you could find whatever you're really looking for, but you might have to dig depending on what you're looking for. So they got tons of soul, tons of budget records. I didn't see anything extremely pricey. I thought the pricing was quite fair. I felt it was chaotic in the best way. So if you want a good bang for your buck and are willing to drive out there, it's not too far from Dearborn or the center of Detroit. And so if you have the time, if you have the means of transportation, definitely check out the Sound Explosion. And to end my first full day in Detroit, my brother and I headed to the iconic Buddy's Pizza, where Detroit style square pizza was invented. I learned that the origin of the recipe was an amalgamation of a Sicilian recipe, which is a bit thicker than your typical pizza, as well as the use of these trays which were used to collect automobile parts, and so nothing gets more Detroit than that in my opinion. And as a result, you got this deep dish pizza, not as deep as Chicago style pizza, but you get this nice fluffy airy crust. I was humbled at this restaurant. I thought we could share a whole pizza, but at the end we had maybe 3/4 of the pizza. But yeah, you get some good bang for your buck. You can really do some damage on your belly at this place. My brother suggested to try Verner's, which is their local ginger soda. And compared to ginger ale, it's a bit punchier. You get more ginger taste out of it compared to something like Canada Dry. It's not great if you want to have some space in your belly for the pizza, but it's a great pairing to whatever you decide to order. And it was that night that my parents arrived from Niagara and I surprised them.
Did someone order pizza?
I know that. How come you're here?
What?
You're silly.
You're silly. Surprise! What? What? What?
They're not the most expressive parents out there, but I think they were generally surprised that I was there. They thought they were just visiting my brother. It happened to also be Family Day weekend in Canada, which is a public holiday. And so I thought it was a very fitting moment to visit them and hang out with them. So for the rest of the trip, it was very wholesome, very family friendly, and it made the trip that much better. So starting my Saturday, I went for a nice run towards Dearborn. So my brother lives near the border of Melvindale and Dearborn, and so I went for a nice jog. It was still cold and snowy there, so I had to kind of watch out for the ice on the ground, but it was a beautiful run, not a lot of people on the roads, and so it was very enjoyable. And then after the run, we headed to our first coffee shop, just the boys. For those who love art, coffee, and supporting local businesses, you need to check out this coffee shop. It's called Black Box, and it essentially is a coffee shop combined with a local artist kind of area. So you have some like local art lined up along the walls. There was also a jewelry pop-up as well. At the time, there wasn't really anywhere to sit, so we kind of had to like lean on the counter. And I noticed that there was also a takeaway window, so it's definitely a place to grab coffee to go. If you want to hang out there, you need to expect to stand while having your conversations. Coffee was decent. They use beans from Great Lakes Coffee Roasters. I did like the packaging. It reminds me of home because I am from that area. Review it. You don't like it?
It's like black coffee, right? Oh.
Yeah. Oh, put it back on.
Not too bad. People just, if you're used to it, then it's like normal taste.
Yeah. In case you didn't know, Dearborn, Michigan has the highest Muslim population per capita in all of the US. So expect to see a lot of Middle Eastern, North African owned businesses. And so our next coffee shop we visited was Galata, which is named after the Galata Tower, I believe, in Istanbul. And so I've had my fair share of Turkish coffee, so I was super excited to have it again with my dad. I'm not sure if he's ever tried it. I think he enjoyed it. And?
Not too bad. It's like regular coffee, but a little bit stronger, right?
It's definitely stronger than what he's typically used to, but if you pair it with Turkish pastries, it's such a nice pairing because they're very sweet. We had baklava, we had kunefe. So yeah, it was a good time to just hang out with the boys, snack a little bit before we headed out to the city. And so if you're into coffee and you've never tried Turkish coffee and you're in the area of Detroit, I highly recommend checking out Galata. Now, in case you didn't know, my roots are in the Philippines. So my parents were born there. And as a Filipino who loves coffee and pastries, this spot was on top of my list in Detroit. JP Makes and Bakes is a Filipino-owned bakery that serves coffee from Craig's Coffee, which is where I got these beans. It's the Motown espresso blend. It's got notes of dark chocolate syrup, melted caramel, Nutella, and has a bold and rich finish, which I personally like in an espresso. I've learned that the roastery is not far away from this location, and The guy who started it came from humble beginnings, started during COVID, but has a pretty lengthy history in the coffee scene. So if you are into coffee, definitely grab some beans while you're there or try their coffee at JP Makes and Bakes. But on to the pastries. So if you know anything about Filipino desserts, they're very sweet, and so expect a lot of sweetness in the pastries. But what this place specializes in is taking European style pastries such as croissants and adding some Filipino flavors to it. So what I tried there was the pain suisse mongo, which is essentially mung beans. They're typically earthy, they're not very sweet, so if you add it to the pain suisse, it kind of balances out. So contrary to what I said before, this one's actually quite nice and balanced. I paired it with an espresso, as I prefer to drink an espresso when I'm eating pastries. So to go, I took the ube coconut matcha latte, and this was fantastic. I'm pretty sure they were on the ube train before it got popular, as it is a Filipino-owned bakery. But what's nice about ube and matcha is that I feel they complement their flavors really well. The matcha is a bit more bitter, while the ube is a bit sweet, and then if you add the coconut milk as well, you get a little bit of natural sweetness. So while it is sweet, it's not overly sweet. So yeah, if you're in the area and you love Filipino desserts and you want something with maybe a little bit of a twist, definitely check out JP Makes and Bakes. After that, we headed to what, in my opinion, is a quintessential spot in Detroit, and that is the Eastern Market. This is a place where you can find local produce, plants, knickknacks from local artists and businesses. And so we went there to grab some veggies to cook. But it's in a pretty cool location in Detroit, very industrial, very rustic, but the vibe is very positive. So if you're looking for a nice weekend activity, I can highly recommend the Eastern Market. Just outside is the Vintage shop, which I believe is called Vintage Eastern Market. I was pretty surprised because I didn't have this on my list of places to visit, but once I got in, I was baffled by how many things were in there. So I immediately looked for records, and then after I dug for a little bit, I went around and discovered some cool jewelry spots. My brother and I hung out at this sporting area, so they had some jerseys, they had old Sports Illustrated magazines and just random sporting memorabilia. So I think there's something for everyone, no matter what you're into. So if you're looking for a nice souvenir that has had some love, definitely check out this vintage shop. And just down the street was, in my opinion, the best coffee that I tried in all of Detroit. This is one of the most beautiful coffee shops in Detroit, but the location might surprise you because it is in the industrial part of Detroit. It's called Anthology Coffee, and it's very spacious inside. You see the roasting facility as well. And so if you want to do some co-working, I'm sure you can find a seat, and I don't check if they have strong Wi-Fi, but I'm sure they do. We went to the spot to kind of catch a break as we had been walking a lot up to that point, and I tried this batch brew that used this Indonesian roast. It had more fruity notes, which my parents were able to pick up, and it was kind of funny watching their reaction to the coffee. Typically, they don't really taste any difference in coffee, but this one definitely did. So here's how they kind of reacted to the coffee.
Oh, this is different. It's like different taste.
What's the taste?
Wow. It's like you put wine. No, no. Though the may prutas ba lang for now?
Why, what kind of fruit is it?
I can't remember. Right, Nay?
Acai berry.
Oh,
What?
Is it right?
there's no wrong answer. There's no right answer. There's no wrong
right.
answer.
If you don't know.
And then finally, we ended the day just strolling the city. I learned that they have this free transportation method that goes around the center of Detroit, and so it stops at key spots. We started off at the Renaissance Center, which overlooks the river between Canada and the US, and so you can see kind of the casino area of Windsor on a nice sunny day. We did some walking around the downtown. We ended up at this showroom of cars. I believe it's the GM showroom. And so we took some time to take some pictures and videos and hopped in some of the cars. My dad's a big car guy, so he was loving it. So it was really nice just to be with them in their element. A little bit of shopping as well, but overall it was mostly just to spend time together and yeah, enjoy the city while the weather was nice. So day 4 was all about family time. It was Sunday, which is typically our church day. And so I was extremely enthusiastic to go to the church of choice for that day, which was New Bethel Baptist Church. If that name sounds familiar, it's probably because that's where Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, was discovered. So back in the day, her father was one of the first pastors at the church, and while he wasn't the first, he was very pivotal in the civil rights movement at the time. He was very well connected with Martin Luther King Jr. I've come to learn that prior to his I Have the Dream speech in Washington, he had an initial speech that was catalyzed by the rallying of the community, and this church was a huge part of that. And so this church has tons of history just beyond Aretha Franklin, which I've come to learn when I visited. They even have this history room where they have some pictures and frames of some news articles throughout their rich history. When Aretha Franklin's father passed away, when Aretha Franklin's father passed away in the 80s, I believe, Robert Smith Jr. took over, and that's the current pastor at this church. He's very charismatic, he's very outgoing, and a really good speaker, in my opinion. He was the one who really focused on strengthening Bible literacy through Sunday schools and invested a lot of time and effort into community outreach and really focused on supporting the marginalized communities of the city. This was where Aretha Franklin recorded one of her gospel albums, One Lord, One Faith, One Baptism, which I have in my collection as well. So I was really stoked to be at the church where she did that. It was a really wholesome moment. It was really eye-opening. The service was very charismatic, a little too charismatic for my taste. Everyone's kind of up and dancing while my parents and I were kind of like just sitting there. We were singing along. We love to sing, but we're kind of more conservative when it comes to how we worship. We were also met with extreme friendliness. There was one lady that came up to hug us. We stuck out like a sore thumb because everyone was African American. We were the only Asians there essentially. But I had a great time, very positive vibes. I would definitely go back. And if you are Christian, if you love music, if you love soul music, there's not only a place to worship, but also a pivotal historical place in all of Detroit, in my opinion. So definitely check it out if you are there on a Sunday and like to visit churches while on your travels. We then had lunch at SIBO Detroit. This is a rather modern place. I would say the cuisine is very familiar. We had a nice brunch there. We had some French toast, we had pizza, we had all kinds of familiar things, but they add a little bit of an innovative modern twist to them. The building itself is beautiful inside, and so I was immediately drawn by the pictures on Google Maps, and I thought it'd be a nice place to kind of have one last meal together as a family, as we do like to eat together after visiting church. And yeah, they also focus on sourcing local produce. They rotate their menu on a seasonal basis, so you can always trust that their food is fresh. And now after lunch, my mom was a bit tired, so the boys went out again to visit the Detroit Institute of Arts, which I've come to learn is one of the most iconic museums in all of the US. It's got one of the largest collections in all of the US. It's very international, so you have collections from all over the world, Africa, Asia, Europe, of course. And the most notable work is definitely Diego Rivera's Detroit Industry, which is essentially murals in this center hall that highlight the working class of Detroit. It's very iconic, very symbolic of the automotive industry in Detroit, which basically is the powerhouse of the economy. And so if you like international art especially, I would highly recommend checking out. It's quite spacious and absolutely worth a visit. So that wraps up my time in Detroit. It was such an amazing visit. I learned so much. I loved visiting my brother and of course being with my parents as well. And so Detroit, in my opinion, is one of the cultural capitals in all of the US. It has such a strong history, not only musically, but also economically it's had its ups and downs. And so when you meet people from Detroit, you get a good mix of personalities. I felt that the people were very positive, and so while Detroit is known for being very rugged, I do believe that everyone is kind-hearted at their soul. And after this visit, I definitely want to go back. There's so much to explore in Detroit, and I only got to scratch the surface yet again. So if you took away at least one thing from this video, or if you have any suggestions on places I should visit next time, let me know down in the comments and I'll be sure to visit them next time around. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok if you do prefer more bite-sized content. And so I started this channel to encourage my viewers to slow down. So with that, I want to encourage you to do so. Take a sip and drop the needle. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.